any money. I was just trying to survive in Brazil. Even the guy robbing you probably liked you.
That's the Gringo tax.
That's the Gringo tax.
The Gringo tax.
That, which is the cocaine capital of there, has United Nations gun turrets on top of Land Cruisers.
2 lives in Brazil, 2 times you've left.
Yep. Like a boomerang, mate, just come straight back. G'day. Good fella. Have a seat.
So you essentially were trapped financially inside Brazil?
Absolutely, yeah. I didn't expect when I first came here that I'd end up marrying, having a kid and then staying. It's just I was only 21 years old. I was a bit naive to what the rest of my life might look like. So
it was that. How long have you been here?
I've been here for 21 years.
21 years?
Yeah, I came here about 20 years. I came here when I was 21. I'm 41 now, 42 this year.
So would you
all
say,
my adult life.
How do you identify? Do you feel Australian? Do you feel American? Do you feel Brazilian?
Not American. I feel that because I've been here for so long and haven't been in Australia for so long, I feel like I've lost a lot of the familiarity with Australia when I go there, which is unfortunately not as much as I'd like to. More so recently, but there was a period there I didn't go for 6 years.
6 years?
Yeah, just didn't have any money. I was just trying to survive in Brazil. I had a little kid. I was divorced. I was just trying to make...
So you came here, you married, you had a child very quickly in quick succession. You divorced, you essentially felt trapped here.
Yeah, I mean, I separated, I think my kid was around 2 years old.
And you
almost 2.
You felt trapped, but you stayed, you could have found a way out. You stayed because...
Well, what did happen is when my first child was 1 year old, we actually went to the United States to live with my dad. So I can't deal with Brazil. I can't make any money.
So you're like, I need to get out of here.
I was only here for probably 2 and a bit years and left thinking, all right, let's go and try life in America. And I had a visa for working over there and whatnot. And through my dad, I was able to stay a long time, had a place to stay, etc. And after about 3 or 4 months there, my son's mum decided she couldn't stay, and I thought, well, I'll go back to Brazil to what? So she went back to Brazil and I stayed there and just got the telephone and started seeing which companies there were interested in trying to get something going in Brazil. And I just presented myself as somebody that might be able to do that. But no one's going to start paying you money to do that because I didn't come from any history. I wasn't from any industries. Yeah, so it was pretty hard. You know, I would look back and think, gee whiz, 3 or 4 years ago, I was, you know, in boarding school in Brisbane and had this wonderful, you know, first world life expecting that things were going to be wonderful, and all of a sudden I'm teaching English for about $4 an hour.
Teaching English.
Trying to get by and feeling like I couldn't leave, not just because of the finances, because I could have asked somebody to help buy me a ticket to get me out of here. And since being here over this last 20 years, I've actually seen that happen. Some people get stuck thinking it was going to be something that it wasn't and have to borrow some money to get out of here. But I actually had a kid here and I was very responsible to make sure that he wasn't abandoned. And so having stayed, that was really hard. I didn't feel like I had that choice to leave, which helped me, was a real good incentive to get going. But at the same time, yeah, it was very scary being in I'll say a third world country. You know, the world sees it as a dangerous place and whatnot, not having the language and then needing money to survive.
And I know you got out of Brazil again. You decided, you know what? I've got a young child now.
Well, the first time I left because I wasn't making it in Brazil. I was borrowing money from my dad for nappies. I was making $4 or $5 an hour teaching English and getting 2 or 3 hours of lessons, you know, a day, maybe 3 days a week. I was borrowing money from a ex-father-in-law here in Brazil.
So it
was a very rough situation.
So you built this life again in Brazil. You created something. You've gone, do you know what? Australia did you go, do you know what? We can have a better life, because a better life in Australia, because when you talk to a lot of Brazilians here, they want to go to America or they want to go somewhere else. They want to start a life in Canada and
the grass is always greener.
The grass is always greener. So did you think, do you know what? I've got a young kid now. I can give him a better life in Australia.
100%. Not just for the kid, but for me and for my wife. But the difference was when we went at the end of 2024, we went there to live. I got rid of everything, got rid of the cars, got rid of everything, and I went over there with a bit of money, able to live a very comfortable life in Australia. And my wife's a surgeon, so we had planned for her to revalidate, and I had a 9-month-old baby under the arm, and so we went there with the full intent of staying
You were done with Brazil.
Yeah, and I think that when my wife and I started talking about the potential of moving to Australia, then I started looking down on Brazil a little bit more, because you're gonna prep yourself for your next decision. You're gonna make yourself believe what you want to do.
You've got to make where you are not as good as where you're going, right?
Exactly. So when we arrived there, and here in Brazil, we had a cook, a nanny. When he was a newborn, we had the nurses at home for the night times. A lot of support. When I had my first son in Brazil, I didn't have the nappies for it. I used to try and save the baby cream, and the talc would be just a little bit soft on it. You should try and it was totally different situations, 16 years apart. So my oldest son's now 18, and my younger son's almost 2. So yeah, it was two very different.
So you've had 2 chances. You've had 2 lives
to leave.
2 lives in Brazil. 2 times you've left.
Yeah, like a boomerang, mate. Just come straight back.
And you're still here.
Yeah.
And you came back.
Yeah.
After you moved to Australia for 2 days or something, right?
Well, 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
6 months in Australia. And
And loved it.
Okay, you loved it.
Loved it. It was great.
It was amazing.
A lot of the creature comforts we get in Brazil, with all of the help, having a nanny and having people to take care of the house. I'm very time rich in Brazil. Play a lot of golf, travel with my friends a lot, go out a lot with friends. My wife and I do a lot of traveling. So there's a lot of that to where you don't feel so limited. And when we got to Australia, even though we had a nanny that would come for a few hours a day, had a cleaner that would come a couple of times a week, and they were Brazilians, by the way. The first thing I did is I went straight for the Brazilians when I get there, because I know them. I don't know who I hire in Australia. I don't understand that area. I left when I was 19, 20 to the States. I didn't have any idea of how that thing worked, but I knew that I could get on the Facebook page, pick up the phone and call some Brazilians and say, hey, you want to come and work for me? And when they arrived, I'd talk to them. I could see how because I'd just spent 20 years dealing with Brazilians.
So when you arrived in Australia, did you feel like a foreigner?
In a lot of senses, yes. Even though I could rock up and say, hey, can I get a meat pie and a coffee or a flat white? I could do all that, but it was just the voice. But back, I was sort of
like
looking
inside,
I was still felt, where do I sit? How do I pay? Can I use my phone that way?
The systems became foreign to you. The systems became complicated to you. You're relearning that world.
Yeah.
And you become so used to. So you're there. You're 3 months in, 4 months in. Mm-hmm. Is your heart telling you, do you know what, I'm Brazilian? Or is it just, do you know what, life's a bit easier?
I'd made a life in Brazil for 20 years. My family's very spread out in Australia, from North Queensland, Gold Coast, Melbourne. My dad's in America. My mum's in Brisbane. So, everyone's really quite spread out. So even when I moved there, I didn't have a hub for where I was going to be, and all the family was there, and back when I was young, my brothers, 2 brothers and sister and cousins, we were always around each other. And 20 years later, I'm thinking I'm going to be playing, cricket in the backyard. I'll be playing by myself, because everyone's so spread out and they got their lives. So I had an image of what it was going to be like.
Yeah, you painted a picture, and it wasn't the picture that arrived. Was it disappointing, or did it? It didn't live up to what Brazil gave you in proximity of family.
I've watched Brazil change a lot in 20 years.
You must.
And from afar, watching Australia. And so when I went back after 20 years of being away, Australia had changed. And some people say for the worse, some for the better. I'm not going to get involved in that. My opinion is that it wasn't what I expected. But now I feel very humble. I'm even looking to when I can go back again now, just for a bit of a holiday.
So how did that feel though? Personally, that couldn't have been easy. I guess because I'm asking because a lot of Brazilians will look at you as a gringo who's built something, is fairly successful, that it's easy. Life's easy. You just came here, you're a gringo, you're rich, everything, the world at your feet.
I mean, the last 5 years have been pretty fruitful, but there was 10 years of not being able to speak the language very well. Writing was very difficult, and I didn't know any other foreigners. I spent probably more than, I think I'd actually thought about it one time. I think it was almost 5 years having never met a foreigner in Brazil.
5 years.
And I was living in smaller cities, and I just never had a lifestyle that had anything to do with foreigners. I was just living with Brazilians, my Brazilian ex-wife's family, and then when I was on my own, I was just in my little apartment, and
I mean, that's isolating.
It is.
How did you deal with that mentally?
Not having the language is a big problem. You feel really restricted, and I have to say that was 20 years ago. We didn't have the means of communication
Was-
we had
was-
today. It was an email once a week.
Social media.
It was an
Social
email
media
once a
20
week,
years
and then
ago.
sometimes I would try and find someone who I could jump on Skype with if they had a good enough connection to have a chat with
would
my
you-
dad or my sister. Or
were you
brothers.
lonely?
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely, yeah. Because
Brazil switched on your survival instinct.
I had to call my dad a number of occasions to. I don't come from a very wealthy family. I had to call my dad a number of occasions to ask me to send me $100 and $200 and stuff just to keep trying to get by. I guess on around about my 7th or 8th year of being here, then I had a okay understanding of the language and started talking to companies in America who were interested in coming to Brazil and saying, hey, I live here, I speak a bit of the language, if you're interested in doing something I can come here, kind of offering myself as a sales rep.
Okay, that's
For
an
whatever I
interesting
could
take.
sell, because I'd never went to university, I had no skills. If I sat down to try and write a CV one time and I was like, wow, that's embarrassing, I won't even know, I won't even try finishing that.
I've never written a CV in my life either. You needed good English, good Brazilian, good Portuguese to communicate inside the country to sell things
Well,
here.
good's relative, isn't it? I mean, if you've got Americans that think, wow, Brazil's a developing economy, I might see if I can get something going there. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. And I was here understanding how to book airfares and jump on an airplane if I needed to and talk to people. But in a technical way, I was very limited. But quite often in Brazilian industries, you'll see a lot of people are English spoken. So it's yeah.
So you were forced into understanding the culture. You were forced into being independent very early in your journey here.
I think that anyone that's just come out of high school and the first couple of years you're finding your feet, anywhere you are, you're going to try and understand your surroundings. And that would even be the same if I'd never left Australia. I would have tried to understand my surroundings to see where I give value and all that. I just happened to do it in a country where I didn't speak the language. So I spent a couple of years on my own, 2 or 3 years trying to get going and just making little bits of money from some sales. And then, fortunately, a company out of Mexico got interested in the product. And I don't know how through Brazil I got to do business in Mexico, but there was none of the employees from the American companies wanted to go to Mexico to service that industry. So I had a bit of a period of time which was my bread and butter, was flying back and forth from Mexico, which was then being able to look in different eyes again what another place was like.
That's pretty interesting. So your position in the world, your location, created the opportunity for you because you were quite unique in that respect.
Yeah, and I think that I was a little more brave because I was younger and a little more hungry because I needed it. But a company had to do a job in a city called Buenaventura in Colombia. And no one goes there. No foreigners go. You arrive in Cali, which is the cocaine capital of there, and then you drive through the forests of FARC until you get down to this little city has United Nations gun turrets on top of Land Cruisers, driving up and around the city. And I went there because I think they were going to pay me about $1,500 for me to go down there for the week to do training on one of their products, and no one wanted to go. So I was like, yep, all right, I'll go. So a few of those things is, during 20 years you have your different experience, and everyone has their experiences, but some of these things started peeling away the levels and giving me a bit more comfort in putting myself in areas that people won't go. So I was doing things that others won't do, hoping that I would get what others won't get.
Fortune favours the brave.
Well, all the ignorant. Some of those times were a little silly.
Oh man, you could say, without going too poetic, is Brazil made you.
100%.
The struggle of putting yourself in that situation.
100%, but wherever you are, you'll be made. It's just that my making
was in Brazil.
In a unique place, because I can guarantee you when I was 18 years old finishing school.
So you came in cold. You didn't have any history on Brazil.
No,
you
never
didn't
been here.
You didn't see anything about the country. There was no one, hey, come to Brazil. It's
No.
like now all these
Didn't like soccer.
like all these influencers on Instagram. Like Brazil's having a real moment now.
Right.
Globally, it's becoming the place to go. A bit like Thailand was a while ago.
But I think that globally comes from our phones telling us these things.
Yeah.
And back then, you didn't have that. How would you figure out Brazil? You go to the library and you get a book out on what Brazil's like. We didn't have such a easy access to information. This is 2003. 2004. This is a long time ago.
Yeah. Because what I see from my Gringo perspective is, I'm guilty of it myself, is I came here with my now wife, and I lean on her
Yeah, sure.
to navigate this strange culture, and that can cause a lot of tension as well, and I see it in a lot of gringo Brazilian couples.
You're not wrong. My wife and I, we've been together for 13 years, and I still rely on her for a lot of things because you only learn what you're exposed to.
It sounds, yeah, like this medical system, this getting reimbursements, reimburses. How do you come into the country and know that I've got to call this number, speak to this receptionist to get this doctor, but then I've got to ask for a lot of codes and a lot of things for the insurance company. It's a minefield. That's something so simple. It's going to the doctor.
Yeah.
How did you learn that?
Well, my wife is a surgeon, so that helps. So that part of life is taken care of.
Right.
But I
she
think
operates on you at home.
I think that would be the case even in Australia. I mean, most households, people do have different roles in different households. But there are things. I remember when I had car problems. I had a really cheap. My first car was a Fiat, and I remember having a problem. And I'm not mechanically minded. I don't know anything about cars. I can't rebuild them or service them or whatnot. And I remember having a car problem, and my Portuguese was good enough to introduce myself, and people asked, where are you from? And I would tell them. But when I would go to the mechanic and say, I've got a problem with my car, that's what's happened, and I wouldn't have the vocabulary, I wouldn't have any ability to explain the problem.
Quebrado.
And they were like, wow, good, there's dollar signs, because he can't speak the language. And I was like, mate, I don't have any money.
That's the gringo tax.
That's Gringo tax.
The Gringo tax comes in.
That's definitely a cost of doing business in Brazil when they see you can't speak.
So because you're forced into it, because you were on your own early in your journey, I've come into it, I can lean on my wife to deal those things, and we do like obras on the casa. What's that? Work on the house. I'm just dropping into Portuguese. Renovations. Reno. And if I talk to them, the price is 20% higher. Yeah. And if she talks to them, she negotiates a lower price. So it's easier just to. There is this thing you have to navigate because people assume you're a gringo, you've got money.
Yeah. To a certain extent, that's all over the world. I mean, you go and travel to Italy and Rome, and you're at a restaurant, and they'll see something. They'll ask for different prices for different things. But when that's traveling, when you're day to day, everything just becomes. You feel like you've got a target on your back, and the difference between us is you actually look like a gringo. I don't. I blend in pretty well. People don't see this beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed person walk in. They see me, little fat bald guy. I get to just walk in and I don't call too much attention. And over the last 20 years, I think after about 10 years, my Portuguese was good enough to where there was very little accent because I was so immersed in the language. But I just needed to add more vocab, which comes from, like you say, the first time I had to go to hospital because I breathed in some chemicals that I was working with. And as like I said, I don't know much about these areas, but I was all of a sudden in hospital, and I didn't know how to explain that what was hurting and this and that and the other. And the medical industry in Brazil just pointing at yourself. And then even where to go. You walk into an emergency room, you're like, geez, what am I doing here? How do I ask? What do I say? So not having that familiarity generates a fear.
Because there is a lot of bureaucracy as well. Just in a simple thing of going to a hospital, there's a system that everybody knows how that system works. Yeah. And if you've never been in that system, you're lost. You're totally lost. And it's scary. I mean, I admit it's scary. Maybe for you it's not scary.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But even a simple thing like
getting on an airplane just by yourself and going off to an airport you've never been to with okay English because an American company, has asked you to go and visit so-and-so company to see if they're interested in their products and all. How do I get from the airport to the meeting? And because I didn't have any money, I couldn't just think, and we didn't have these Ubers and the Google Maps and all that. We didn't have any of that. This is talking about MapQuest times where you would print out the pages to know where to go. But they don't have that in Brazil either. So everything was just arriving at the airport. Where do I go? How do I, this, that and the other. And not being able to, I'll just change flights or I'll just stay in a hotel tonight. I was very financially limited, and that generated a lot of fear for me about, it was an incentive, but it also made me quite anxious about starting business in Brazil. And then that was representing other companies. And then about 12 years ago, went to set up my own company, and I didn't even know where to start. And my father-in-law, he ended up actually setting up the business for me. I mean, in my name and showing me how to do it. So that's it.
You had inside out.
Without that, that's hard.
There's a wall. It's almost impossible to enter this country and understand how it works.
Even the Brazilians have a lot of it. My accountant today, he's got specialists in each area, and they go through training every 6 months because they can have a meeting in Parliament and just decide a slight change, which won't be publicised anywhere. It'll be buried in a 500-page document, which could be something that could generate, you know, a fine or a change in how I'm supposed to do business. So it's a very, very complicated place to operate.
So at what point did you then think, okay, this is it, Brazil's for me? Was there a point you ever went, do you know what? This is my life, this is here, or were you always looking, okay, I'm going to make enough money and get out of here, or this isn't my life? Did you actually settle and say, yeah, Brazil is my home?
You know, during that 6 years that I couldn't leave, that was a really hard time. I felt like I was a victim of some bad decisions when I was young and all of this, that and the other. And, you know, it was, I kind of felt like, oh, I hadn't done a good job with life and this will just be what it is. And then as I started to find my way through Brazil a little better, started to make a little bit more money, I finally scraped up some money to go to back to Australia, having not been here for 6 years. And that was a bag of mixed emotions. It's like I was going home, but it was always like, geez, that's a hard way to look down at Brazil. I mean, I've just learned so much. And so when I was there, oh, everyone's, oh, how's Brazil? You know, what's this, that, and the other? Oh, wow, you can speak some Portuguese and this, that, and the other. And then I started thinking, wow, actually, I have been in Brazil now for, 8 years or something like that, and or 6 or 7 years. And yeah, I did learn a bit of a language. Never expected to learn another language in my life. I mean, if you look at my report card from school, I've never been an academic at all.
Needs must.
So yeah, had to learn. And Portuguese is not exactly the easiest language, and it's not something you see everywhere. And so yeah, learned another language, and then they'd be like, I was actually traveling to Australia on money that I made in Brazil. So it started to make me think, hang on, I made this money in Brazil, and I'm now spending my Brazilian money in Australia as an Australian, because I never had a job in Australia. You know, I've never done tax returns and all that crap. I've never really had anything to do with working in Australia. And so then when I was coming back, there was a strange feeling when I was arriving back in Brazil, like, gee, I've been complaining about this place every single day about the complications. And when I came back, I was actually a little bit happy coming back, you know, not like, oh, you know, arms open to the country.
There was a distinct change in your attitude.
There was, which didn't mean...
It wasn't one day to the other, it was kind of like a slow, do you know what, this is starting to become home.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's home is a tough thing, and I think that I'm so fortunate to come from a country like Australia. And I would never hand up my Aussie passport or anything. I love Australia, you know, especially up until when I left, up until 2000. Australia's a very different country over this last 20 years, but I look back, still listen to my Midnight Oil, I'm in at work, and Jimmy Barnes, and I feel like I hit pause on Australia from the 2000s. The Brisbane Lions had won a couple of premierships in the AFL when I'd left. I feel like that's how I paused Australia. And I was just back there now for 6 months. I went back again. Yeah. I ran away from Brazil again after.
Go back to how I met you, and it's sport. I met you
rugby,
playing rugby in BH Rugby, and I remember you were probably, I think you were the first Gringo I met in Brazil, actually. And I remember the first thing you said to me was you called me a C word. And I was like, oh yes, this guy gets it. I'm going to get on with this guy because he's just straight in.
That's that 20-year-old talking to you.
But that was what, now, 12 years ago? Yeah, 12 years ago I met you in the rugby. And
well, you would have been one of the first. I mean, I think I probably only knew a half a dozen or a dozen Gringos before, but there's sometimes people you just see at a bar. Because they go to that bar, you have a beer, that's it. But developing friendships with foreigners is different.
And through sport. And the sport, because you're playing rugby, cricket and golf, not very Brazilian sports. Yeah, and that's how you keep your network of the Gringos, right?
So yeah, I've had a lot of different experiences. Sport's been one of those things. I got involved with cricket because when I started meeting other foreigners, it was actually through a bar. I actually saw that there was a bar called Bar de John, so John's Bar, and I went there to meet this John guy. And when I got there, he was an absolute legend. We're great mates, and still, he was here in Brazil a couple of months ago. You know, we'd out a few times. So that was 2011, maybe. I went there and met him, and there, all of a sudden, there was a whole bunch of Gringos. And the Gringos of Canadians, the mining industry, the agriculture, the banking and everything. And there was sometimes 30 or 40 Gringos there a night. And I went there like, wow, these are all like me. And then I realised, no, they've come in on mining contracts as engineers with their house paid for, their cars all set up for them, their flights are all booked.
Flown in, dropped in, everything's there
everything's catered for, they've got their office there, that's the house, all set up. And I really only met a few people that are in similar situations to me, where they've come and have stayed because they're with a partner that they're wanting to live in Brazil with, or they've got an opportunity to work here that's a little bit different to somewhere else. Maybe they're not thinking about retiring here, but they do have long-term, plans on being here. And so that really helped me express what I'd gone through for the previous probably 8 years. And then even like us, sometimes we can sit down and talk about some of the particularities of living in Brazil. It's quite unique.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique place, definitely unique. What would you say what is Brazil? What is Brazil to you, and how is it different from the rest of the world? Why is it difficult? Why is it amazing? Why does it get under your skin? Mm-hmm. Why does it make you want to stay? You left twice, you came back. just give me a kind of overview of how you see this country.
It's there's so many aspects to Brazil. There's a working aspect, there's a social aspect, there's a travel and tourism aspect. There are people that love to enjoy holidays, and Christmas is the big feast. I mean, they're always trying to find a reason to do something, social. So there's a few aspects to Brazil. I've found professionally the business aspect, which was one of the reason I'm harping on this business aspect of it, is because it was not having a business or making money when I first came to Brazil put me in a very difficult place. So all of the other aspects of my life were limited because I didn't have the money. So I couldn't enjoy the travel. I couldn't go out and enjoy the food and all of those things because I was limited to the money that I had that was limited. So now I'm able to enjoy the travel and the support of having help around the house and those types of things. So if you have to break Brazil down into some different aspects to look at that. I've been very fortunate with my wife. We've been together for 13 years now. We have a 2-year-old boy, turning 2 this month, and she's got a wonderful family. I'm very close with them. And so I've built this new life here, not me getting up and doing it, just by
step by step,
just by being
week by
here,
week,
it's kind of formed around me. So I've got a very fortunate situation personally and also professionally. I've got my own business. I've had that now, been living off of that, and it's been growing nicely for probably the last 10 years.
Okay. So, with all your 20 years experience being in Brazil, dealing with the bureaucracy, dealing with the culture, dealing with the amazing parties and everything that comes with living here. If you have advice for somebody who's been here for maybe a year, or is in their first few months, or is even looking to come to Brazil because Brazil looks tempting, what would be your advice about? I think earning money here is very important. I think that's the key. That's why you keep going back to business. What would be your advice?
That's anywhere.
But in Brazil, it's particularly tricky, I would say. What's your general advice?
I think having financial stability is a good thing here. As an Australian, when I was there, I never thought, if I don't do too well for myself, I'll just have more of a simple life. Whereas when I was in Brazil and I was worrying, if I don't do too well for myself, I'll be under a bridge. You don't expect to have the support system of the government assistance and this and that. The level, Brazil's got a massive social service program, but the level that you get to live at, when I look back at Australia, is something that no Australians live like the level that Brazilians live at that are on those social programs. So I thought that's not even an option for me. I would prefer to go back to Australia and do FIFO work, fly in, fly out in mines in Australia, or something to come and go, rather than be here on sort of handouts. I couldn't take care of myself. So financially is.
So would you say try and build your own thing here?
But in order to do that, you need a lot of other things. You need a language. you need a bunch of things. There are some people who can work via over the internet with companies in other countries and whatnot. And I think that's a wonderful place to be. But then you've got to start focusing on, how do I live as a Brazilian? How do I sort myself out a place to rent or to buy, the bank accounts, all this, that and the other. And I tell everybody, my experience, whether that be through my incompetence or just through too many experiences, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Anytime you think you're getting somewhere, something will make you have to come back a step, redo it and keep going. And that's in business, that's even in social life. I was surprised you even arrived on time, because you've been here.
É hora do Brasil, né?
Yeah. So
everything runs behind, everything runs late. But you have the jeito brasileiro. Everything works. There's a
Everything-
way
you
to
can
make
eventually
everything
get-
work.
yeah.
Everything will eventually work out, and I love that.
You
about
see
this
a brick
country.
wall in front of you. Most countries, you'll figure out how to Brazilians figure out how to go through it, under it, around it. You know,
Yeah,
so
it's that is the key thing, because everything will work out.
my family has identified that in me. When you ask me how do I see myself, I see myself one way. I guess what's more important is the way other people have seen me, and my brothers and my sister and my dad, and everyone sort of looks at me and they say to me, you speak different, you know, you smell different, probably because all the garlic. I love all the Brazilian garlicky food, but they say you're a very, very different person. Now, everybody's different from 20 to 40, but my situation's been quite different because I didn't come here out of getting a world map and figuring it out and talking and coming up with a plan. It was just like, I'll go and do some tourism there. I was a bit young, and within 3 months got married, and then, you know, quite soon after had a kid. So I didn't have this plan here, and so my family identifies it. My good friends, I was just there for a friend's 40th birthday, and we had all of my old boarding school mates. And when we're sitting around talking, they've all just said to me, wow, you're so different. And I guess because when you come from a social group, when you're young, you all kind of have a bit of a mold you kind of follow.
Lane, right? You stay in the same lane.
You're all sort of a product of the same culture and food and what's on TV and the sports you follow and the clothes you wear and this, that and the other. And if you go and take someone out of that herd and put it in a different environment, they change.
You see, so you're saying, it's anywhere in the world. You go and you move and you say. But I personally, I look at this from the Brazil, because of the jeito brasileiro, because of the way the country is so bureaucratic, and it's not easy to operate here. That can either crush you, or it can force you to create something greater. And I think with you, you've really discovered that there's a way around everything.
Yeah, whether that be through through desperation and having to figure it out, or being smart enough. And my technique has just been banging my head on the wall as long as I can to see if I can eventually break through. And I've got a lot of other friends in different industries, and some guys that you know who have lived all around the world. I'm talking Africa and Europe and Asia. And when they come here, and some of them have had 10 years of experience here and all over South America, and they also find it relatively unique. And I do think that has something to do with just the size of the country. The economy is massive. Any scale business in the world that you want to build, you can build in Brazil. There's a lot of opportunity. It's just that is where you've come from allowed you to have the tools to be able to do that. And I think that's very difficult. I think you do need some time to acclimatise, get a bit of the language going, understand how things work. Things are a lot easier now with the internet and AI and all that stuff.
And that's, to kind of mix it all up, is when you arrive here, the culture is so warm.
Sure.
And so helpful.
Brazilians receive foreigners amazingly.
It's just that Brazil welcomes you with open
arms.
They
do. Brazilians
and
are
they
so
help
good
you.
with foreigners.
You can be stood in any kind of cartório or anything, just with documents lost, and they'll
Someone
help you.
will help
and then
you.
they'll invite you for dinner. And then they'll invite you to a barbecue.
Absolutely.
They'll introduce you to everybody in their family.
That's got to be one thing.
It's amazing. And that's why I fell in love with Brazil. Really, is the warmth.
Yeah.
And
that was a wonderful aspect, going through my hard times here, but being treated like that is amazing. Can you imagine being in a country that doesn't like foreigners, and then all of a sudden you rock up and you're kind of forced to be there. You didn't pick to, but now you've got a family there and you got to try and make it work, and they're not welcoming you. That must be really rough. And in Brazil, it doesn't matter where you're from. Any person from a country that's not in Brazil, they'll find fascinating. Where are you from? What's the food like there? What's the weather like there? They're so curious about other cultures, other people. And that's a wonderful thing in Brazil. If you were going to say, what's one of the easiest things to get along with in Brazil, you'd have to say the Brazilians.
Yeah, that's it.
They're great people to get.
They make the country.
You have the crime and the this, that's, and the others, but you know, even the guy robbing you probably likes you. He's probably, hey, where are you from? Taking your wallet. Well, that's got a different driver's license. Where are you from? Thanks, mate.